colleagues. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us from. We hope that you and your families are all well in these unprecedented times. On behalf of the PULSAR team, we are happy to welcome you to our 10th PULSAR webinar entitled Accountancy Education in the Public Sector, Updates on IFAC Initiatives and Tools, and presentation on survey results on PULSAR EduCoP, Progress Update, and 2021 Work Plan. The main objectives of this Smart Interactive talk are to learn from IFAC on the latest initiatives and tools related with accountancy education, to present the results and findings of the survey on the progress status for the scaling up of the IPSAS training of trainers rollout, and to discuss the potential priority areas for further support from PULSAR EduCoP to beneficiary countries during 2021. In order to achieve these objectives, we have prepared a full agenda, including renowned experts, both from IFAC and from within our own team, that will join us in discussing these topics today. I would like to remind you that webinar materials, including the recordings and presentations in all PULSAR languages, will be available shortly in our CFRR website. Please also feel free to post any question you might have using your preferred language directly into our chat. Without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Daniel Boyce, Practice Manager in the Governance team for East Europe and Central Asia, who will share with us his opening remarks. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jose, and good afternoon, good morning to everybody. On behalf of the WorldBank and the PULSAR team, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to this, which is our 10th PULSAR virtual workshop, which we also call the Smart Interactive Talk. Today, we're discussing the accountancy education in the public sector, as we do in the EduCoP, and especially on two items. One is the IFAC's recent initiatives and tools that have been introduced for accounting education, and one is more specifically on the PULSAR EduCoP activities, including the recent survey results, an update on the progress of the training of trainers, and the discussion of the 2021 work plan. I want to first thank all of you for allocating the time in your busy schedules to attend this event. I hope your families are doing well and managing during these difficult times. We are continuing to work to adapt all of the PULSAR activities, including EduCoP, to the pandemic situation. It's been about a year now, and we still look forward to when we'll be able to come together and meet in person and resume the face-to-face format that we had before. I think we should especially thank our honorable guests and speakers today, Helen Partridge and Rania Uwada, who represents IFAC, who will share the recent events with us, especially recent amendments to the International Education Standards, which were introduced in 2019. They'll provide information also on the e-tool that's helping to align the accountancy curricula with the IES, and also provide some illustrative examples which may be helpful when you're adopting the standards in curricula that are related to public sector accounting and public sector accountancy. The second part of the webinar will be devoted to the discussion of the EduCoP survey, because that affects the EduCoP work program. The survey was conducted in recently, February and March, which was aimed at exploring the progress of PULSAR EduCoP train of trainers scaling up in participating countries. It was also designed to identify possible work areas for 2021 and to see which areas are most interesting and seen as the best opportunities really for the EduCoP members. We're facing a rapidly changing environment, giving us new challenges under the COVID-19 pandemic. and it's having a significant impact on the accountancy profession, not only in terms of accountancy education, but the profession generally. These changes have created both challenges, but also some opportunities for accountancy education, and they've made it necessary to kind of rethink and reinvent certain tools and learning methods applied in the education process. Of course, education from top to bottom, whether it's a young child in school or university student, has been profoundly affected as well by the pandemic, with fears that maybe we're, as a whole society, we're losing ground, and certainly we want to keep up in all areas, and in our area it's keeping up in terms of accountancy education. So this, for the discussion today, I think we want to talk about the education standards and the accountancy curricula that should remain aligned with these changes in accounting and financial reporting standards, and any changes to these standards or trends that may be affecting the profession during the last year or so. The PULSAR EduCoP has been supporting the development of accountants and finance professionals in beneficiary countries for several years now. Between October 2019 and early 2020, the IPSAS Training of Trainers program for the core group of trainers from PULSAR countries was completed, and that formed the basis for the further scaling up of IPSAS training in beneficiary countries, which we'll follow up on today. Today's expert presentations and discussion between the PULSAR team and the EduCoP members will then help to define the EduCoP activities in the coming months and years. So I hope you'll enjoy the event, and we are looking forward to seeing you also in our next PULSAR webinars, whether it's for EduCoP or some of the other parts of the PULSAR initiative. Back to you, Jose, to continue with the further proceedings.
Thank you very much, Dan. And our first presentation in the agenda is on IFAC's tools and initiatives. So I will pass on the floor to Helen Partridge and Rania Ubaida. Please, the floor is yours, Helen.
Thank you, Jose. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with an exceptional group of members of our profession. This pandemic has impacted everyone differently, and I hope your family, friends, and colleagues are doing well. Let me share my screen. I just realized I'm not. So I know we were asked to present on the IFAC Accountancy Education tool, or e-tool as we lovingly refer to it, but I think I would be remiss if I did not provide some background as to the changes in accountancy education at IFAC over the past 18 months. As such, today I hope to provide an update regarding IFAC's new approach to accountancy education, the recently effective amendments to the International Education Standards, or IAS, and some of our current initiatives. Following this, I have a video to provide an overview of the e-tool, which is now the home of the International Education Standards, and after which I've asked one of the members of the International Panel on Accountancy Education, Rania Ubaida, to discuss the supplemental support included in the e-tool, specifically related to the public sector implementation guidance. To assist our member organizations as they face dynamic accounting education challenges in the profession, in 2019, IFAC commenced implementation of a new approach to advance accountancy education at the global level. This approach, which is designed to be relevant, responsive, effective, and open, harnesses IFAC's comparative advantages to respond to opportunities in an agile, effective, and efficient manner. It benefits from the advice, access to resources, and advocacy provided by the International Panel on Accountancy Education. It draws on the output of a multi-stakeholder engagement framework, and it renders a wide range of outputs through optimizing the use of resources across all IFAC activities, and very importantly, leveraging the resources of IFAC member organizations, the firms, and others. The new approach builds on the high-quality work of the International Accounting Education Standards Board, or IAESB, which, together with the Consultative Advisory Group, ceased operation in 2019 with the conclusion of its work plan. In completing the work plan of the IASB, revisions were made to IAS 2, 3, 4, and 8. These newly revised international education standards address learning and development for information and communication technologies, or ICT, and professional skepticism. The revised education standards include newly added and revised ICT and professional skepticism learning outcomes that improve the relevance and quality of professional accounting education offered by professional accountancy organizations, including IFAC member organizations. They identify learning and development activities that enhance the professional competence of aspiring and current professional accountants. And they support the accounting profession in its provision of high-quality financial reporting, auditing, or other related financial and accounting services in this digital age. These revised standards became effective January 1st of this year. In addition to these standards, supporting guidance was also produced to provide some more detailed, non-authoritative learning outcomes related to ICT, as well as implementation guidance for professional accountants in business and public and sector accountants. So these standards were revised really to address the competency, skills, and behaviors for both aspiring professional accountants in these critical areas as the market expectation increases for ICT skills and professional skepticism. And while these revisions were finalized in 2019, in their future job report for 2020, the World Economic Forum noted that the automation and technology will continue to drive changing business models across the financial reporting ecosystem. As a result, accounting, bookkeeping, payroll clerks, and accountants and auditors are all in the top 5 declining roles. But this decline for accountants and auditors moved from 7th in the World Economic Forum's 2022 predictions issued in 2018 to 4th in this most recent report. But take a look at those jobs that are increasing. Data analysts and scientists, big data specialists, process automation specialists, digital transformation specialists, and information security analysts. So as such, I find the revisions that were issued in 2019 to be highly relevant to the future of our profession. So all this leads into the current initiatives of IFAC Accountancy Education. We can no longer limit our thinking to traditional activities or functions of what an accountant is expected to do. Rather, we must develop behaviors and competencies an accountant needs to respond to demand. While there may be accounting and finance related roles eliminated due to technology, much of what will change is the integration of people, processes, and technology into newly defined accounting careers. With ICT-related skills now expected to be part of the skills and competencies of a professional accountant, we can turn our attention from accountants doing the same thing with the heavy use of Excel, reconciliation of separate systems, etc., to accountants doing the same things differently, using small automation and communications, and then to accountants doing different things. Which leads me into one of the most significant initiatives we're working on within IFAC Accountancy Education related to sustainability or ESG services. IFAC, amongst others, continue to advocate that the professional accountants are best suited to provide these services. Others note the profession is essential to the public interest in this area. Skills such as data analytics, assessment of materiality, collaboration with others, including experts, and lifelong learning to fill subject matter knowledge gaps are all foundational skills to the professional accountant. These skills, combined with the ethics and the integrity the profession is known for, is why we are best positioned. As such, IFAC will continue to work with the PAOs through the International Panel of Accountancy Education to demonstrate that professional accountants have the skills and competencies needed to prepare, assure, and utilize this information, working closely with experts in sustainability. In identifying which existing foundational skills can be leveraged to meet new requirements, and in creating access to obtain new subject matter expertise, IFAC supports the positioning that accountants are best placed to meet the sustainability-related needs of organizations. We actually believe the profession is much closer to being able to provide services as both a preparer and auditor than some may believe. For example, in discussions with my colleagues at the IPSAS board, the IPSAS already include guidance that allows public sector entities to report on the impact of sustainability programs in the IPSAS financial statements, and to reflect the broader impact of such programs on the entity by applying the IPSAS recommended practice guidelines that include reporting on the long-term financial sustainability of an entity's finances and service performance rating. I hope examples such as this, combined with the foundational skills of a professional accountant I mentioned earlier, encourage others to see how close we are also. So onto the e-tool. This was launched in 2020 to help accountancy education stakeholders navigate and access key principles of the international education standards and the related implementation support. I thought rather than talk about how the tool works, a video demonstration would be best.
Welcome. This video provides an introduction to IFAC's approach to advancing accountancy education and how to navigate the IFAC Accountancy Education e-tool. The e-tool, which is grounded in the International Education Standards, is an interactive platform for accountancy education stakeholders. The e-tool is more than an electronic handbook. It links the standards and practical implementation support in an easy-to-navigate one-stop shop. It is available anywhere and at any time. The e-tool is a valuable resource for all parties interested in accountancy education, including regional and national professional accountancy organizations, firms, regulators, qualifications authorities, educational institutions, aspiring professional accountants, and professional accountants. The IFAC Accountancy Education e-tool can be accessed from the IFAC website at www.ifac.org under the What We Do tab. You can scroll down to prepare a future-ready profession and click the Launch the e-tool link. Use of the e-tool is free. However, users must agree to the terms of use by clicking the I agree button before accessing the e-tool. This will bring you to the home page of the IFAC Accountancy Education e-tool. You can learn more about IFAC's approach to accountancy education by clicking the link to the video. To stay current and learn about innovative accountancy education initiatives, frequently visit the In the Spotlight section. And do not hesitate to let us know should you wish to spotlight one of your initiatives. We also recommend that, in addition to this section, you frequently visit the Knowledge Gateway to stay current on how IFAC and its member organizations are equipping professional accountants and professional accountancy organizations for the future. And while there, sign up for the latest. The Knowledge Gateway can also be accessed from the IFAC website homepage. To assist accountancy education stakeholders to navigate and access key principles in the International Education Standards and related implementation support, the e-tool has 4 sections: Entering an Accounting Education Program, Initial Professional Development Content for Aspiring Accountants, Applying and Assessing Initial Professional Development for Aspiring Accountants, and Building and Maintaining Skills and Competence through Continuing Professional Development. Each IES is presented in an easy-to-navigate format with links to practical implementation support developed by the former International Accounting Education Standards Board, IFAC, or an external party. Let's take a look at IES 4, for example. Some text has been collapsed to make it easy to identify the most salient parts of the standard, including the requirements. Let's explore paragraph 12. Requirements are indicated with a check mark. Defined terms have been shaded. Clicking on a term will take you to its definition in the glossary and enable you to look up other terms while in the glossary. To close the glossary, click. To read the explanatory material related to the requirement, click the plus to expand the explanatory material box. Clicking on the underlined text will indicate related practical implementation support. Click on Go To Resource to access the material. These resources can also be accessed under Tools for Implementation at the end of the and include material providing an overview of the standard, implementation support, perspectives, studies and reports, tools, thought leadership, and external publications. From here, you can access the previous standard or the next standard, or you can click on Home to go back to the home page of the e-tool. The Share tab enables you to share parts of the standard in an email or elsewhere. The Key tab reminds you how requirements, definitions, tools, and reference documents are distinguished in the standard. And if you have any questions, you can use the Get Help tab and complete the Contact Us form to provide your contact information and ask your question. The e-tool also has a search feature that allows you to find specific keywords in each of the standards.
So as I mentioned, the e-tool is just about a year old. So at some point later this year, we will likely be seeking feedback input on how we might be able to enhance the tool. But in the interim, if you have some time to use the tool and have some feedback for us, please do so in an email. Or if there's initiatives, as mentioned, that you would like posted or implementation support that you think would be helpful to others, again, feel free to share that with us. So now I'd like to introduce Rania Ueda, to discuss the public sector implementation guidance. As I mentioned previously, which is included in the implementation support section of the e-tool. I've had the pleasure of working with Rania for a few years now since we shared some time on the IASB and know her for a passion for advancing the skills and competencies of the public sector accountant. This and the recognition of these skills within the profession make her a true champion for this segment of our profession. Thank you, Rania.
Hello, everyone. First of all, greetings from Beirut, and it's really a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to present our work to you. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so what I would like us to do today together is to go through the public sector implementation guidance to understand its content, its structure, and how it may be used. But first of all, what I'd like to do is to share with you some background about our project, which gave rise to those documents so that you can better understand really where they're coming from. So these two documents, they're produced and published by the IASB. I was privileged to be chairing the task force, the public sector task force, and leading this effort. Our task force was established in April 2017. We started work the following June, and our work or project spanned the 2 years up until June 2019, when our board was disbanded. So our analysis of the environment had identified a strong push, a recent strong push to hold governments accountable, and therefore to enhance public sector governance systems and enhance PFM systems, and therefore transparency and integrity and so on. And therefore, given the fundamental role of accounting within this context, this implied higher expectations of public sector accountancy. And therefore, our question as a board was, do our IESs prepare our accountants for this challenging and evolving role? And so this was our task as a task force to try and answer this. Next slide, please. So our first order of action was basically to conduct extensive literature review and to reach out to our stakeholders. And our findings were, one, that our IESs are perceived, or our education standards, IESs, are perceived to be private sector oriented, despite the significant common ground between public sector and private sector accountancy. Expectations of private sector and public sector accountants are fundamentally different. And third, and therefore, there was a perceived need to expand our public sector education offerings. And these findings, they shaped our project to be. Next slide, please. And so our project's purpose was to identify the skills and competencies required by public sector accountants that have yet to be addressed by our education standards. And so in terms of scope of our work, we performed an in-depth analysis to identify the distinctive characteristics of public sector accountancy and perform a gap analysis between those public sector competencies and our extant IESs, and to understand the impact on learning and development needs of these gaps. Next slide, please. So in terms of methodology, what we did was we identified relevant literature, competency frameworks, public sector syllabi, etc. We conducted a high-level review. We narrowed it down to 7 selected documents, of which we conducted a very detailed review, and we identified the gaps. That is the public sector specific competencies and knowledge areas that are missing from our education standards. And then we did a mapping between those and our IES competence areas. And then we identified the most commonly cited gaps. Next slide, please. So to sum up our findings very briefly, the differences between public sector and private sector accountancy may be categorized into 3 broad buckets, if you will. First is financial reporting and financial management practices. Second is audit and assurance practices. And third is the political and public policy environment. All those differences are mostly concentrated in IES 2, and they, which is IPD, or initial professional development, and they are basically of 3 types. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, so the first type of differences are differences relating to perspective or the absence of a public sector reference. For instance, our standards refer to business laws and regulations. They refer to IFRS, but they don't refer, for example, to IPSAS or IPSAS, and therefore you can see the private sector connotation there. The second type of gaps are more substantive and are basically due to very public sector specific knowledge areas and requirements that are simply absent from our standards. For example, our standards do not allude to the nature and range of public service provision or public policy setting or public-private partnerships or public debt and its potential impacts on economic activity levels. So these are completely absent and they should find their way in there. And finally, the third set of differences are those pertaining to highly specialized areas such as compliance and performance audits. These are core to public sector. However, our IESs only call out financial statement audits in IES 2 and IES 8. So what we did was we took all those findings except for the third one item, which relates to the highly specialized areas. We took all those findings and created our implementation support material. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there are 2 documents of implementation support material, and they provide guidance to those who wish to create public sector curricula. It is noteworthy that throughout the process, we were receiving feedback from our stakeholders, including INTOSAI, AFRSAI, public experts at the ACCA, of course, our board, IPSASB, and so on. So we were getting feedback throughout the process. So there are 2 documents. We're going to go through them now. So if we can go to document 1, please, Helen. Great. So this is the first document. So these two documents go hand in hand. This document that you're looking at right now, it gives us the theory of the guidance, if you will. So it starts out, what you're looking at right now, it comprises 3 different sections. The first section, what we're seeing right now in front of us, is a statement as to what this document is, why it's there, and how it may be used. And then if we scroll down a bit, please. Yes, to page 3. Thank you. Okay, so this section, it provides some fundamental concepts that relate to the differences between public sector and private sector and are important to understand the differences and the adjustments or the enhancements, if you will, to our standards and why they should be there. And then if you scroll down, please, to the 4th page, middle of the 4th page, yes, here. Okay, so what this is basically the meat of the guidance. So this is a table, as you can see. It should be read as the note says. It should be read in conjunction with Table A of IES 2. Okay, and so this table comprises 2 columns. The one on the left is a list of all the competence areas exactly as per Table A of IES 2. And then on the right-hand side, next to each competence area, there's a narrative that explains how the list of existing learning outcomes in our standards, how they apply to public sector, and how they may be enhanced, be it in terms of adding a public sector reference, for instance, or adding an entire new knowledge area, but within the spirit of the competence area, of course, and the learning outcomes, as we will see in a bit, so as to better fit and cater to the needs of a public sector curriculum. So what I'm going to do right now is just to show you, to take one example, which is competence area A, what we're looking at right now. So for instance, the narrative next to it starts with a note saying that, so this competence area is called financial accounting and reporting. The note says that this area could be renamed to accounting and reporting because that would, to better illustrate the fact that in public sector, accounting and reporting extends beyond financial aspects. And then the next paragraph talks about how the set of existing learning outcomes apply to public sector curricula, however, they should be enhanced. And then the third paragraph, addresses how those enhancements should be and why. So for instance, instead of just referring to IFRS, we would need also to refer in terms of bodies of standards to IPSAS and IPSAS, because those standards cover transactions specific to public sector, such as, for instance, non-exchange transactions, heritage assets, and social benefits. So as you can see, it takes the competence area, the note at the top of the table, above the table, tells us to make sure that we read this table in conjunction with Table A of IES 2. So you're looking at the learning outcomes in IES 2, and you're seeing how they apply and how they should be enhanced and why. And so then if we go to document 2, I'm just going to link this, what we just looked at, to document 2. So can we please go to document 2? Okay, so now document 2 is a companion document. So really it serves as an example of how you may apply the guidance or the theory that we were just looking at in document 1. So again, it starts with a statement as to the purpose of the document, why it's there, and how it may be used. And then can you please scroll down a bit? All right, no, just one more page up. Yes, okay, great. So now this is how document 2 is structured. So it's a table. If you look at the first 2 columns, these are Table A as per taken exactly from IES 2. So they are an exact excerpt from IES 2. So on the far left, you have the competence area, and then in the middle column, you have the learning outcomes exactly as they are in IES 2. And then on the right-hand side, you have the learning outcomes for public sector curricula. And so this list, if you go through it, you will see that it's basically applying the guidance that we just went over in document 1. So for instance, learning outcome I, or number 1, it reads, apply accounting principles to transactions and other events. So this applies exactly to public sector curricula, so it is kept as is on the right-hand column. But then if you go down to the second one, apply IFRS or other relevant standards to transactions and events, if you notice the public sector, the right-hand column enhances it so that it better serves public sector. So it reads, apply IFRS or IPSAS or EPSAS or other relevant standards to transactions or other events. And then if you notice, we added one more learning outcome, suggested learning outcome, in line with what was mentioned in the guidance, which is, the whole point of referring to those extra body of standards is because the accountant must be able to report on non-exchange transactions, heritage assets, social benefits, and other transactions that are specific to the public sector. So, this column over here applies the enhancements, and it shows you how you would, or you might, apply the enhancements as stated or in the guidance document that we were looking at. And then, for example, the third learning outcome under competence area A, we kept it as is, but then the fourth one, we kept it as is. We added the reference to IPSAS, EPSAS where applicable, and then we added one more suggested learning outcome, which is to prepare financial statements for different types of government departments, ministries, and agencies, because in public sector, you cannot it's not enough to just prepare financial statements, but public sector accountants also have to be able to prepare financials for different types of governments and ministries and so on and so forth. And so, as you can see, this document here is an example of how you might apply the guidance in document 1. Of course, both of them are non-authoritative guidance. It's just how we see our standards applying in the public sector context. And so that's it for me. Thank you. Over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Rania. So Jose, that's the end of our presentation. We'll welcome any Q&A. I also know that I do have one of my colleagues, Ross Smith from the IPSAS on the call as well, just in case we have questions in that lens.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thanks, Ross, for joining also. Thank you, Rania. These have been very, very interesting presentations and very relevant for our PULSAR education community of practice. I would like to kick off the Q&A session with a question regarding the implementation support material, which is currently grounded in International Education Standard 2, IPD, or Initial Professional Development. So we would like to know what about its applicability to CPD, Continuous Professional Development?
Okay, thank you. So yes, we as I mentioned, so the gaps that we identified are most concentrated in IES2, but the competence areas within IES2. However, the competence areas in IES2 apply equally to CPD, or continuous professional development, as is described in the CPD standard, and especially for those accountants who are moving from private sector to public sector. And these two documents are grounded in the learning outcomes approach. So the idea, which embodies the idea that you should continue your professional development based on the skills that you need in order to carry out your job and your role.
Thanks so much. Very clear. The second question from the public so far, and please a reminder to all that you can post questions in our Q&A session here in the Zoom. The second question is how come the International Accounting Education Sectors Standards Board did not come up with issuing a new standard for the public sector?
Okay, well, so this is what we had planned on. However, as I mentioned, and that's why I mentioned it at the beginning, we really had just 2 years for our project. So by the time, and we were really very close to coming up with a decision at the board to pursue or to start working on a new standard. However, that's when we learned that the board was going to be disbanded, and so we had really a very limited time frame, and we were working against the clock. So the guidance was, the best we could come up with during that limited time, given that issuing a standard entails a certain due process. Very specifically, it requires, exposure, and exposure takes a lot of time, and we just in a nutshell, we did not have time for that.
As always. Yeah,
I was going to say, to add to that, I think, as Rania clearly demonstrated, and her team was fantastic, there are enough hooks within the IES. It's a very broad set of skills and competencies, and that, one of the foundational skills that an accountant should have is lifelong learning, and being able to take the skills that you learn in one industry or one sector. You should be able to then pick it up with additional knowledge and apply it to something else. I go back to one of my past careers. I used to do fixed asset impairments. Well, I've done fixed asset impairments on automotive manufacturing facilities, and I've done it on dolphins. Right? The concept of a fixed asset impairment and how a fixed asset is considered, what you think about, it's there, but I have to figure out what a dolphin's life is, right? I have to figure out what so it's just a question of taking that lifelong learning skill and figuring out how to apply that skill to different scenarios. If that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Helen. We have time for one more question, so I invite my fellow panelists or participants to a final question. Otherwise, we're gonna go to the next session. In the chat box, we don't have more questions so far. So we're gonna proceed to the next to our next presentation. Thank you very much, Helen and Rania. Thanks for staying also in our next presentation. So as part of our PULSAR EduCoP, my fellow TTL Patrick Umatete and Natalia Konovalenko, as part of the team, will now take the floor to guide us through the PULSAR EduCoP survey results, the progress updates, and the 2021 work plan. So Patrick and Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We shall start with Natalia going through the survey results, and then I'll talk about the progress update and the 2021 work plan. Natalia, over to you. I see you've uploaded the slides.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you, Jose. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is great to have you with us today, even so virtually. So as colleagues already mentioned, the second part of our event will focus on discussion of the survey results, progress and work plan for 2021. And the session is structured the following way. We will talk about the survey results, then about progress in public sector accounting education and participating countries, and then we will focus on the work plan for 2021. And I'll start with the first part, and then we'll pass over to Patrick. So the survey was conducted in February, March, and its purpose was twofold. First purpose was to get feedback from our EduCoP members on the progress and current status of implementation of the Train the Trainers program in relevant countries. As we all remember, in 2019 and 2020, the TOT sessions were conducted with involvement of ACCA, and about 100 of the first level trainers were trained at those sessions. And each PULSAR country submitted a plan how to disseminate the IPSAS training in their countries, identify a number of the second-tier trainers and training center or other institutions to be used for scaling up the trainings, number and timeline for conducting those trainings, etc. But considering the circumstances that changed at some point in 2020 due to pandemic situation, the plans implementation were suspended or revised. And so with this survey, with its first part, we tried to understand where PULSAR countries are in the TOT scaling up program. And the second purpose was to identify your key priorities for PULSAR EduCoP activities. Again, taking into account the circumstances we are all working in now. So out of around 30 plus EduCoP members, we received 23 responses for the survey, which is seem to be sufficient to do analysis and get in the general picture of the progress with the TOT program and with your current priorities. And as you can see from this slide, the distribution of responses by country is not even. We have a couple of countries who provided more responses than others. Thank you very much for this. And we have 2 countries we didn't receive feedback from, but I hope that we have representatives from those countries with us today. And at the end of today's event, we are planning to have a very brief poll consisting of just 2 questions, which stem also from this survey. So with this, we hope to get full coverage of PULSAR countries on these important aspects. And now coming to the current status of the scaling TOT program scaling up. As we can see on this slide, most of respondents, 46% and 16%, in total 32%, indicated that they are either started the TOT program scaling up or are planning to do so. Out of them, 16 respondents indicated that they trained a certain number of the second-tier trainers, and this process goes on and will be completed by the end of 2023. Among the respondents, there are 2 countries who indicated that they already started scaling up the training. Other countries are in the process of planning this TOT program, which is being suspended due to pandemic. And several countries didn't have plans to extend the training or didn't provide any information on it. On this slide, we can see preferred types of support that respondents indicated as needed for trainers to scale up the TOT program. And a major part of respondents indicated that trainers need sample learning materials, 46%, as well as key studies and other practical materials, 29%, and 22% of respondents indicated that having an online platform would also be useful. The next question related to the frequency of EduCoP webinars, and most of respondents, as you can see on this slide, indicated that having them monthly or once in 2 months would be preferable. Okay, now we are going to the second part of this survey and focusing on the priority areas of the respondents' interest for PULSAR EduCoP work. And as you may see on this slide, 30% of respondents indicated that development of an IPSAS-based model curriculum is one of key priorities. And we will elaborate more on this in our poll today. And remaining percentage of responses distributed among different types of experience sharing, among PULSAR countries or experience from EU countries, or based on specific topics discussed within PULSAR FinCoP. And finally, we asked in the survey about tools that may be helpful to EduCoP members in delivering education in the public sector. And as you may see, the distribution of responses on this slide is the following. 25% of respondents indicated that case studies, practical examples, and implementation guides on particular IPSAS standards prioritized from those most commonly used to those most complicated and not actively used in PULSAR countries, and 22% IPSAS-based model curriculum, again for public sector accounting education, and 22% for development of IPSAS online training course by joint efforts of PULSAR EduCoP members, and 20% responses are for development of a detailed manual or trainer's guide for IPSAS training course by joint efforts of PULSAR EduCoP members, with on outlining of specifics existing in each country, and 11% short guidelines, brochures, other dissemination materials to be helpful to IPSAS trainers. So these are results of our survey. Thank you very much to all who took part in it. And over to you, Patrick, for the next slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. As you have seen from the survey, we had two major conclusions. The first one was about PULSAR participating countries taking certain actions aiming to scale up IPSAS TOT, and some countries are in the process of planning their training or dissemination. However, progress has been slowed down by COVID pandemic and related lockdowns. Then the second one was about the strong interest to continue sharing experiences in public sector accounting education from either the PULSAR member countries or good practices from around the world. There are other conclusions that we'll talk about in the learning program in the upcoming slides. Now, on progress update of public sector accounting education. As you're aware, we focused on two things. The first thing that we did in PULSAR EduCoP was to focus on doing a trainers of trainers course in IPSAS, and then scale it up. So we had the first tier, where the first tier of trainers to train from the 13 countries. And I think on average, we trained about 6 participants from each of these countries. And we had 4 venues where this training was conducted in Vienna, Tirana, Sarajevo, and Batumi. And a total of 79 participants were trained by SCCA. And the end of course assessment pass rate was very high. It was 97%. So after that, the idea was, how do we support the rollout, and how do we support, how do we strengthen this process? So we also complemented this training with online IPSAS certification course by SCCA. And to date, 60 people have passed the course. We still have about 35 people who have not yet completed the course. And we negotiated with SCCA to extend the period for them to complete this course. And it was extended for another 6 months. I think this is essential. If you are amongst the 35 and you have not started the process of doing the course, and maybe you're having challenges, it is good to get in touch with us. Anara is our point of contact on this. She will help you with this. Now, the last slide on the which complements also the conclusions. The work plan of the 2021 for 2021. when we looked at the survey, there were critical things that came out that have influenced our work plan. First is to strengthen collaborations with strategic institutions providing public sector accounting education to identify partnerships with PULSAR member countries on the following areas. One is IPSAS online courses to scale up country training programs. That was one of the key findings, to have some online courses. And as you're aware, we had ACCA. We have some service providers that we can work with. We have ACCA, we have CFRR, and PwC is also another one that we shall be sharing with you how they provide their courses in different languages. So there are these service providers that we can collaborate with. We don't have to reinvent online courses. We can collaborate with either of these. We can act as a bridging with the countries to share what these service providers can provide. And if, for example, you like what they do and they have the language variant aspect, they have taken into consideration language aspects and learning materials within those courses, then as part of your scale-up program within the country, you can go into an arrangement with discussing with any of these service providers on how to move forward to train more people within your country. So PULSAR can be a good vehicle in strengthening this collaboration. Similarly, also with learning materials that include case studies and practical guides or manuals for public sector accounting trainers. Again, here, we don't have to develop or reinvent the wheel, but there are collaborations, strategic collaborations that we could look into, and then strengthen that. And sometimes it can come as a package: online training, learning materials, and so on. There are also strategic partners when it comes to IPSAS-based model curriculum syllabus. That can be used in public sector accounting education. At university level, we are aware about, for example, DIPSAM, which is developing and implementing European public sector accounting education modules at universities. It's mainly developing these modules for universities at undergraduate and graduate levels, and they basically are promoting compliance with IPSAS, but as you're aware, IPSAS is closely linked to IPSAS. So it can be a good starting point in terms of reflecting on how to have model curriculums. But that is not the only one. There are others that we could look into. And where there are gaps that we feel that there is no strong partner to collaborate with, then we can think of developing. So this is the kind of approach we are thinking of moving forward with how we can support the PULSAR member countries in scaling up their public sector accounting education. Then the last point is, of course, which was also reflected in the survey, was to continue on the idea of sharing good examples of public sector accounting education and successful implementation of IPSAS. There are many examples. We are aware that we have 3 training styles in the PULSAR member countries. There are those that train through professional accounting organizations. We could look at, for example, good examples of how professional accounting organizations have incorporated public sector accounting in the professional qualification. There are countries like Philippines that come to mind. There are also others that have decided that they are going to have a diploma in public sector accounting education. So we could also look at good examples of that. SCCA has also designed a diploma in that regard. We could look at, there are other universities that train through there are other countries that train through universities. Already we talked about DIPSAM, which is helping to develop modules for universities. But there are also other universities like Nodes University that is helping a number of countries to strengthen their syllabus, Nodes in Norway. So we could see how those good examples can apply to these countries that do their training through universities. Then the last type of training that we have in PULSAR is through training academies, mainly under the Ministry of Finance. So we could also look at good examples of how that is being done. So this is how we see we can add value and share with you these experiences for you to have an idea of how you should eventually go about scaling up public sector accounting education. I'll stop here. I think we have some questions that we can go into, or the survey. There's also a survey to run on 2 questions.
Thanks so much, Natalia and Patrick. I would like to only give the space to IFAC if they want to make any reflection on what they have heard, because this is something also very important for them. So please, Helen or Rose or Rania.
Thank you, Jose. The program you guys have set up, and thank you again for letting me listen to this. It's fantastic. It makes me so excited to see how a group of people, a group of professionals such as yourself, have come together to figure out how to tackle this important issue. And as sad as the pandemic is, I'm also excited that it's broken down barriers that have allowed us to have conversations across continents like this. And I can only hope that we can use some of the work that you're doing as examples to others. Rania or Ross, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add.
I have a question, actually. So this is really very exciting, very interesting. And again, as Helen said, thank you so much for the opportunity to have us, to listen in and to know what's going on. On a personal note, I would say I wish you had something similar for the Arab countries, but I guess we're hopeful. My question to you is, so is there a commitment on behalf of all the PULSAR countries who are taking the training to adopt IPSAS? And if so, is it accrual basis IPSAS, or just, just to know how the program works and what are the requirements? Thank you.
Yeah, on this question of the countries adopting IPSAS, we have some countries who want to adopt IPSAS. In fact, most of them want to model around IPSAS, but they are cautious about the national standards. So they want a blend between what is happening at national level, guided by good practices in IPSAS. That's the general sense that we get. So generally the answer is yes, but taking into consideration certain country circumstances, especially national standards.
Okay, great. And just one more follow-up question, if you don't mind. So now that the training, the TOTs are being rolled out, what's the next step, and how would you measure the success of such a program? Like, would you actually expect to see something within, the reporting standards of the government? Just an idea. What are you looking for as an end result? Thank you.
Yeah, we've asked each of these countries to set up a plan to roll out IPSAS national plans. Some of these plans are being integrated within the public financial management reforms of the country. That helps a lot when it comes to deal with funding issues. And also if strategic partners are involved in picking up, in sponsoring some of these activities. Sometimes development partners focus on what is in the public financial management reforms. So if they see that an aspect like this is there, they could also pick up interest in supporting it. So that's how we are approaching it, to incorporate this training within the national reforms, and also engaging strategic. We are strategic partners like the ministries of finance and so on. And fortunately, we also have another group called FinCorp where they are engaged. They are so much interested in learning what is going on, but at the same time, it's also a good opportunity for them for us to also share with them how the education aspects can take place. So this is how we're approaching it. Aman, I think, would also talk a little bit more about this because he oversees the whole program from a strategic point of view. I see him nodding.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Ross Smith has a question. Please, Ross, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jose. And it's more of a comment. I just want to say first, kudos to the various organizations involved with these initiatives. It's great to see the emphasis on a full support program for broad PFM reforms that include accrual accounting adoption. This is one of the key challenges we hear from jurisdictions all the time, that when they undertake the accounting reforms in isolation, it's very challenging to make progress, that they're much more successful in a broad program of reforms. And I think it's great to see this focus as part of the PULSAR program. I also wanted to say another aspect we hear quite a bit is the challenge in some jurisdictions with building up the public sector HR capacity to undertake the implementation of IPSAS and these broad reforms. So again, kudos for the broad focus of the program and the ongoing support. I think this really is a model for other jurisdictions. And I know we often, when we're talking to various implementers, cite this program as a model to consider, and the support initiatives being provided are, I think, a key element of the continued success. So very happy to see this progress, and just to echo some of the points that Patrick touched in his presentation, I think this is really what's enabling the success in these jurisdictions, and just kudos to everyone involved for getting behind this support and keeping it going during COVID. I know that's been a real challenge we've noticed, is a lot of PFM reforms have stalled with the pandemic and the broader needs in the public sector at this time. But I would actually say it looks like the PULSAR program's embraced virtual working and continue to move forward. So I just, all around great job. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ross. These are really encouraging remarks for us. So we are a big team, and we are trying to do as much as possible to imagine that COVID does not exist, and we still are pursuing all our objectives. So that's our aim for the remainder of 2021. So back to Patrick for the next Q&As that are already in the chat box. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Yes, there is a question which says, is this accrual-based IPSAS? Yes, it is. Our training is focused on accrual-based IPSAS. Yeah. If there are no questions, I think we can go to the survey questions.
Perfect. Thank you. So, Irma, will you take over on the poll? Just to explain briefly, this is a short poll of 2 questions. You will see in your screen the poll translated in all the languages along with the proposed answers, and we will give 1 to 2 minutes so everyone can vote, so we can have a sense of which are the burning issues or priorities for the remainder of 2021. So you will see briefly the box with the poll. Irma, okay, so the first question is, what is the status of the accounting curricula for public sector in your country? And the options, you will have to drill down to see all the options. But the first option, option number 1, is complies with IES and IPSAS, and it's well implemented by education providers. The second option is complies with IES and IPSAS, but education providers need training. The third one is partially complies with international education standards and IPSAS, and education providers need training. And the fourth option is does not comply with IES and IPSAS, and curricular education providers need strengthening. So we will give about 1 minute or 2 so everyone can vote. Sorry, we have both the 2 questions in the same chat box. So I'm going to read the second question now. In 2021, PULSAR EduCoP focused to strengthen public sector accounting education. Should focus on 1, IPSAS online courses, 2, IPSAS learning material and training guides, 3, IPSAS model curriculum or syllabus, or 4, sharing good examples of public sector accounting education. So you have to vote in both questions, please. In 30 seconds left for final thoughts. If anyone did not see the pollings in the screen, please write us. And if you see, please mark one answer for question 1 and 1 answer for question 2. We will give 30 more seconds. So we have been receiving the answers. Thanks to all of those who voted. Please, if you haven't voted so far, I encourage you to vote so we can have as many answers as possible. Okay, we are rounding up. Irma, if you want, we can start closing the poll and projecting the results so we can discuss on this. Patrick, back to you to elaborate on the results and start the discussion.
On the first question about what is the status of accounting curriculum for public sector in your countries, we have 38% of the countries comply with IAS or IPSAS, but education providers need training or support. And then another 38% partially comply with education IAS standards or IPSAS standards, and education providers also need training or support. So that's huge. There's a lot of support required in about 76% of the respondents. And then another 25% say they do not comply with IAS IPSAS, and the curriculum and education providers need strengthening. So when you look at that, 76% plus 25, wow, that's what 91%. That's really high. So that is really high in terms of the support that is required. On question 2, it's about the 2020-21 PULSAR education forecast to strengthen public sector accounting education. This question basically says most require learning materials, IPSAS learning materials and training guides. This is 63%. That's the biggest priority. The second biggest priority is IPSAS online training, and then sharing good examples. This question was a bit tricky because if we said all of the above, most of you would have said all of the above. So the reason we wanted you to put you in a constrained environment of selecting one of these 4 was to show which ones are the big priorities. I think this is it. It's very useful information on how we move forward. I also think that working on the IPSAS model curriculum is still important. So we shall look at these results, and it will help to influence the 2021 work plan. Over to you, Jose.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Well, now I would like to open the floor for any participant who wants to chip in on the discussion of the work plan or the priorities. And so please raise your hand in case you want to add anything to the discussion. Otherwise, we're gonna go to the next item. Yeah, in any case, it was really important that there was a high participation regarding representation within our countries. PULSAR countries, we received responses for 11 out of 13 countries. So that gives us a good idea of where we stand in the PULSAR beneficiary agenda, let's say, on pushing this IPSAS train of trainers, and also from the information that we gathered through the survey, complemented by these polls, we think we have enough to continue modifying the agenda on a demand-driven basis with all the voices. So if there is no additional comment from the participants, I will like to give the floor to Arman, our PULSAR program manager, for closing remarks, and we will then finalize the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. It was really a pleasure just joining this event, and it was very well organized by EduCoP leadership. And I would like just to thank our IFAC partners for very interesting presentation, sharing their perspective, specifically from thanks to Helen, Ross, and Rania for very interesting insights. Of course, the key point here was that IAS updates and recently effective revisions have been presented, and that the global perspective was presented that accounting and auditing professional role is declining. So we cannot stay where we are, and we need to change. And the change should not be that much evolution with small automation, but the discussion is that we need just to go through the revolution and keep in the peace with all other developments globally. So we cannot stay intact where we are. And of course, with understanding that data analysts and big data scientists, information security are the topics where we can also try just to connect and try just to evolve our role. While IFAC clearly states that the accounting profession is absolutely essential, and it will remain essential, and the work of PAOs is very important in this regard as well. It was also very interesting to learn the Accountancy Education, IFAC Accountancy Education e-tool, with how interactivities, the search function, and clearly IFAC expects a feedback from also PULSAR members if you see some changes are needed, and we will be also happy to share. Very positive from the PULSAR perspective. It's very positive to see that IFAC is also considering the public, and the IASs are considering the public sector perspective, and including the discussions of the financial reporting or just reporting, accounting and reporting, because public sector were engaged in much broader topics on budget reporting, performance, statistical, and those all with financial reporting, they are the roles of the accountants mainly. And here it was very positive to see how it was connected and how even the current discussions at the board to pursue IS on the public sector, and that may probably give a more focus of the public sector and the expectations needed. What is clear, the message today is that lifetime learning skills are applicable for the public sector with some tailoring, and that is the way we should proceed. I like the survey. It was very informative, and it was interesting to see how EduCoP leadership is engaging with our countries, and this is where PULSAR, our team, is going to learn and hear what are the priorities of our member countries and you as participants. Thanks for sharing all your plans. And including, it was very good to learn on the TOT rollout. 46% stated on they are started or planning to scale up it. And it was very clear on the frequency once a month, which is also good. And the priorities. Actually, out of those 4 priorities, I was just struggling to see, and I was expecting to see which one people are going to board, because all 4, as Patrick says, I mean, they are all relevant. And also, you also noted that I think that this is actually all interlinked as well. But it was also very important to see that, yes, there is 100% need for training for education providers. And that is which demonstrates the importance of EduCoP and the important role that PULSAR EduCoP plays in filling this major gap in all our PULSAR member countries. On Rania's point regarding how PULSAR can go broader, we are looking into broader, and Ross on PFM. On PULSAR, we have 3 lines of what we call subtasks. On the EduCoP is one concentrating on education. We have FinCoP, financial reporting frameworks, which are addressing the financial reporting standards, adaptation, implementation, IT systems. And we have another one, which is called awareness raising, because we also understand IPSAS implementation, all the reforms we're talking, including education, they require a major political support and awareness raising, and that's why we also have a separate activity, and they are all integrated, interconnected, so they support each other. And of course, the WorldBank, our competitive advantage is that we are at the WorldBank heavily engaged in all the countries in PFM reforms, and we know where the demand comes from and help our countries to shape this program. Of course, we are open for other regions. For example, with LUG, we have regular inviting our LUG counterparts to join, and MENA, where I believe our EduCoP as well, and as well as PULSAR program will be happy just to welcome MENA regions and other regions to join our events. So again, I would like to thank all who joined this event and all the organizers and for great delivery. Jose, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arman. And thanks so much to the participants and to the whole team of EduCoP, and of course our guest speakers from IFAC who did a great job. So thank you very much. I hope to see you all in our next Smart Interactive talk, soon to be announced. So this is the end of the webinar. Thank you very much. Goodbye.